Hello, everyone. I'm Isabela Villas Boas, and I work for Cultura Inglesa Brazil, a large English language teaching institute with branches in many cities in the country. So, today I'm going to talk about proficiency exams and classroom assessment, friends or foes. So, first of all, when we think about whether they're friends or foes, or when we think about proficiency exams and classroom assessment, we need to understand the two paradigms of assessment that are accountability assessment and classroom assessment. Both are important, both serve their purposes, but they are completely different in the paradigm that they follow. So, when we look at accountability assessment, we're talking about proficiency exams, such as of course, regarding English language teaching, such as the TOEFL, Cambridge exams, IELTS, etc. There are also university entrance exams that many countries have, exams for public jobs, etc., governmental jobs, etc. They are accountability assessments. They have to have a very high level of reliability because they are high stakes. Important decisions are going to be made based on them, whether students will be accepted for an academic program or for a job. So they really have to have very high levels of reliability. They are standardized. Everybody has to take the same exam under the same conditions, as we all know. When we talk about proficiency exams, they are based on a global framework, in which case, in our field, usually it's a common European framework of reference, and they are large scale. So it's really impractical to only assess performance in accountability assessments, at least up to now. With artificial intelligence, this is likely to change very soon. Now, who designs accountability assessments? Testing experts and psychometricians. They are the ones who design the concepts and the items in accountability assessments, and they have the purpose to judge and report the efficiency of learning to stakeholders in general. Now, when we look at classroom assessment, they are a completely different kind of assessment. We're talking about tests, quizzes, projects, presentations, podcasts, videos, writings, portfolios that teachers assign to their students in order to inform their teaching. So they have to have a very high level of validity. They are personalized. They're not based on a big framework. They're based on learning outcomes, and they are small scale. They are classroom assessments, so they are the responsibility of teachers themselves, or maybe a group of teachers in an institution, but not a whole system of education or a whole country, etc. They are designed by teachers, and they have the purpose of assessing learning, not reporting. Okay? So, designed by teachers and to support learning, to promote learning. They are assessment for learning most of the times. They should be. So, are accountability assessments and classroom assessments friends or foes? Well, actually, accountability assessments are based on a psychometric paradigm. They have to follow certain psychometric rules, whereas classroom assessments are based on a pedagogical paradigm, not a psychometric one. A mistake that we have made over the years is to construct our classroom assessments based on a psychometric paradigm, replicating accountability assessments. When in reality, classroom assessments have to be based on a pedagogical paradigm. They serve different purposes. So we cannot compare apples and bananas because they are completely different, right? When we look at reliability, validity, and washback, and we talk about classroom assessment and accountability assessment, they're based on completely different rules of reliability and validity specifically. So, when we think about the concept of reliability, which has to do with the consistency of scores, right? The formats and content of questions, the time given to students must be consistent. And we know that the more items on the test, the more reliable it is because you have the chance to confirm whatever judgment you're making. When we're thinking about accountability assessment, reliability has to do with patterns of scores for groups of students across multiple test administrations. So we have to look at groups of students. In classroom assessment, we look at the same sets of the same assessment administered over time for an individual student, how reliable it is for that student, not for a group, for a whole population. We're not comparing whole populations when we engage in classroom assessment. So the way we see reliability for classroom assessment has to be different from the way we see reliability in accountability assessment. When we talk about validity, right, the extent to which the test or the whatever assessment tool you're using measures what it purports to measure, content construct validity, right? This is also different when we talk about accountability in classroom assessment. In accountability assessment, we have to make sure that the exams that are administered are based on a wide range of standards in broad topics. We have to make sure that they are based on a framework that has been studied and is accepted by the international community, such as the Common European Framework of Reference, which contains a wide range of standards and broad topics, whereas classroom assessment is limited to a very small number of standards, and it's limited to the topics that are being dealt with at that moment in the classroom. So it has to be valid based on those specific standards that are being worked on. It has to be aligned with those specific standards and not with wide proficiency standards, wide range of competencies. So again, the way validity is seen in classroom assessment and accountability assessment is different. So almost all problems associated with classroom assessments find their ultimate source in the concepts of reliability and validity. An assessment's validity can be limited or mediated by its reliability. So the more valid an assessment, the less reliable it's going to be if we are talking about a psychometric point of view. But when we talk about the classroom point of view, we mediate the reliability and validity. Okay, so we focus more on validity in the sense that it has to be authentic. It has to be based on authentic communication, and we don't have to observe the patterns of reliability of standardized exams that have to be multiple choice, control many variables. We don't need to do this with classroom assessment because it's limited to a single community of students and not a wide community. So we need, as Hugh proposes, right, when we make an effort to take tests reliable, we reduce their validity. There will always be a tension between these two. But actually, when we talk about classroom assessment, what we need to really focus on is in making them valuable, valuable for the learners, valuable for our students in our classrooms. So we need to rethink when we talk about classroom assessment why we assess, what we assess, how we assess it, and what we do with the results. We need to change the assessment culture in our communities, the social and educational environment within which we will carry out these reconsidered assessment strategies and tactics. Why are they reconsidered? Because we are talking about classroom assessment, and classroom assessment has some characteristics that make it different from accountability assessment. Classroom assessment should mostly be formative and authentic. And as Brookhart proposes, we need to observe these strategies when we work on classroom assessment. When we talk about formative classroom assessment, we need to make sure that we include these three stages. First of all, we need to see where we are going. And she proposes some strategies for starting on a learning journey. So, what is the target? Where am I going? What are the outcomes that I'm trying to reach? And where are students now in relation to this target? Where am I now? So, we need to check where students are now and using a number of different tools to check where they are and what we need to do to make sure they get to where we want them to get, that they reach our target. So, how do we improve the learning so that students will go from where they are in relation to where they need to be regarding each learning target? And that's when teacher feedback, self assessment, and peer assessment are important. In assessment for learning, students are agents of the learning process, not just recipients. They are involved in the learning process. And in this case, we need to differentiate traditional assessment from authentic assessment. We need to make sure that, yes, we may do a little bit of traditional assessment in our classrooms, but we need to move more towards authentic assessment because classroom assessment makes it possible for us to engage students in authentic assessment that is performance oriented, that focuses on learning and reporting of achievement of learning outcomes, that focuses on skills and competencies and not on memorization, that focuses on oral and written production at the discourse level, that fosters creativity and critical thinking, and that is personalized. We cannot engage in accountability assessment, for example, in a personalized way. It has to be standardized. But for classroom assessment and authentic assessment, it doesn't have to be. It should be personalized. And it should be performance based that involves performance, true performance of the students in the classroom, and not just completing, um, filling in blanks, selecting responses, deciding if something is true or false. This is very limited, and it's limited to lower order thinking skills. If we want to assess students' higher order thinking skills, we need to focus on performance based assessment so that we can not only develop their declarative knowledge, but also their procedural knowledge, right? Declarative knowledge has to do with learning about something, knowing how to explain, for example, something. And procedural knowledge has to do with learning how to do it, how to really perform the task of communicating in a certain context with a certain profile, in a certain register, and within a certain genre. So we need to develop our students' procedural knowledge. And students can demonstrate their learning in many different ways that I'm here um, adding little by little so you can have an overview. There are many different ways in which we can elicit students' learning that go beyond only traditional exams, only traditional tests. I'm not saying here that there isn't space for traditional tests in our classroom, but our classroom assessment instruments cannot be limited to traditional instruments because especially in this society now in which we need to develop our students multiliteracies, in which we need to develop our students soft skills so that they will be relevant professionally in the face of the rise of artificial intelligence, we really need to engage them in other ways of demonstrating their learning that will tap into creativity and critical thinking. So we need to bring to the classroom a promising view of assessment, an assessment system that will look at what students can do and not on their deficits, not on what they cannot do. We need to work hard to guarantee our every student's success, every student's mastery of what we are engaging them in learning. So, are accountability assessments and classroom assessments friends or foes? Actually, they are friends. They should coexist. We do need to prepare our students for accountability assessments. They will have to take IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge exams, Oxford exams, um, Pearson test of English, whatever it is that you have in your context, they will have to take because institutions still require them. But what we cannot do is to base our classroom assessment only on the formats of accountability assessments, because accountability assessments are one of the many genres in which that our students will encounter in their real life need to use English. They will need English to pass an exam, but they will need English for many, many other purposes. So we cannot limit our classroom assessments on preparing students for preparing students for accountability exams. But how can we prepare students for accountability exams? Giving them mock exams, training them for the exams, using exam like items as exercises in the classroom, but not using the formats necessarily for classroom assessment. Because for classroom assessments, we need to collect authentic artifacts and we need to assess students using proficiency rubrics, right? But proficiency rubrics, not the rubrics used for accountability assessments, but based on the proficiency in that specific task. So you will reach the standards fully if you um, provide evidence that you have reached that learning outcome and not a wide range of outcomes as the CEFR of competencies. Um, Ideally, standards based and not instruments based, and give the students the opportunity to receive feedback and redo the tasks in order to improve on that task and not because usually we think about, oh, we're going to give feedback, so when they do another piece of writing they're going to use this feedback, or when they have to give an oral presentation again they're going to give this feedback. Actually, we should give them feedback on those tasks and give them a chance to redo those tasks, because this is what makes assessment for learning, giving the students a chance to improve, to act upon the feedback that we receive them immediately. So, according to Stiggins, the perfect assessment system has to have a clear assessment purpose, clear learning targets, high quality assessment instruments, effective communication of results, and powerful new links to students' motivation. If students, if everything is very clear to them, and if they are assessed in an authentic way that focuses on what they can do best, they will be more motivated to learn and they will have a positive view of assessment. Because after all, teachers don't teach for test scores, but to impact a child's life. We want children that are prepared for the tests of life and not a life of testing. So, this is my message to you today. They are not foes, they are friends. They should coexist, but treated separately as separate views of assessment. So I'd like to thank you very much for being here. I hope that these insights contribute to your development of your assessment systems in your institutions and that you can differentiate the purposes and the mental models, the different purposes and mental models that are behind accountability assessment and classroom assessment. Thank you very much.